All right, friends, welcome in, and let's say hello to everybody on the stream. Welcome to Flamesnation Live on a Friday night. Pat Steinberg and Ryan Pike along with you. A little cameo from our producer, Logan Gordon, here at Sportsnet 960 The Fan through the window. Welcome to Flamesnation Live. Hopefully everybody is doing well. Let's see, we've got some people on. Let's see who's going to be first in to say hi on the comments. Start commenting on Facebook Live. It's Pike and it's Steinberg. I'm live here at our Sportsnet 960 studios. Bob first in on the hellos. Pike is live from what looks to be his couch at home. How we doing, Pike, on a snowy Friday? The Flames are still making moves. It's like every day or two we get some sort of news from General Manager Brad Treliving.
They're running out of things to do at this point. I mean, in the last few weeks, like we've seen, Andrew Mangiapane avoiding ARB. Glenn Godden signed, a bunch of depth forwards signed, and then today, which we'll probably get into, Nikita Nestorov. So it's been busy, and it makes me wonder what's left to do, because looking at the roster, like there's always going to be some question marks, but is there anything left they can do under the cap ceiling to really maneuver right now?
Yeah, and that's the big question. Now people starting to get in. Like when we're talking, it's a little delayed to when we see the comments. It's about a 30-second lag. So John's in, Noah's in, Rob's in. Welcome everybody, and we'll keep saying hello to people as they pop on the stream. Flames Nation Live. We usually do them Mondays and Fridays. You can always get them live on the Flames Nation Facebook page, and then whether it's YouTube or Instagram or archived on Facebook, you can always tune in later as well. Yes, Mr. Pike, let's get to the, I guess not the huge news of the day, but the news of the day. And that is this, as first reported by our friends over at Puckpedia. They were all over this today. The timestamp on this is 1:23 p.m. Mountain. Believe the Flames are completing a deal with 27-year-old defenseman Nikita Nestorov that would eventually come true and be confirmed a few hours later. But Nestorov, the newest member of the Calgary Flames, is a one-year deal at $700,000. And what's interesting, you were on it right away. He is a left-shot defenseman, yes, but he's a left-shot D who can play the right side. And Brad Treliving, the GM, confirmed to Post Media's Wes Gilbertson that they see him as a right side defenseman. So there's been this hole. There's been this that looks like they're a little thin on the right side. Does this all of a sudden open the door for Nestorov to be the number 3 right side defenseman next season?
Probably. I mean, someone on my Twitter feed put it very eloquently. Guys don't come over and sign from the KHL. Like, Nestorov was and still is a pretty big deal in Russian hockey. He was the captain of the Olympic team for Don't Call Us Russia, because they weren't allowed to be called Russia at the 2018 Olympics for various reasons. But he was the captain of the team that won gold. He's been an all-star of the K. He's been an all-star in the AHL. He's been an all-star basically every level but the NHL. He's presumed a cliff between ages 24 and 27, and people rarely do. He's gonna be he was and probably still is a pretty decent NHLer, and so for pennies on the dollar, the Flames got a guy who can come in and play that right side. And I broke down the site yesterday, actually this morning, the idea of, okay, if you look at pairing by pairing and line by line, the Flames are about the same, slightly better in some areas, but a lot of the growth was dependent on some of these young kids they have having big steps this season. Now, instead of having to roll the dice on Oliver Shillington playing on the right side in North America for the first time in 5 or 6 years, they don't need to, because they have Nikita Nestorov, who has done it at a high level. He did it. The folks over at the Raw Charge blog from SB Nation wrote about it a couple days ago when it was rumored that he might be going to Tampa Bay, and he played a lot of the right side when he's playing with left shot defensemen. He can play the left side too if you need him playing with a right shot defenseman. So there's a lot of flexibility there that the Flames didn't have before. So I don't know what this means for Oliver Shillington outside of the fact that he's
That's the big one for me. Like, does
like
that spell the end of Shillington in the organization? He's the only unsigned RFA, or does that mean that they see him as the number 7 defenseman for
that's
next season?
that's a pretty good. I had him or Alex Petrovic as the 7, and that's a pretty good 7. I mean, Shillington's a guy who can sort of do a lot of different things and haven't really carved out a niche yet. Whereas, here's I think the interesting thing is, if you came to me and said what pairing going to be the top pairing, I'd say probably Giordano and Anderson. But as we speak, today Yusuf Alimaki, the leading scorer the leading defensive scorer in all of Finland right now. He's 22 years old. He's playing the left side theoretically behind Hannafin, but if Valimaki comes in feeling 10 feet tall and looking the way he has looked in Finland, what do you do with him? You move him to rotation. Like Mark Giordano's gonna be 37, going on 38. He's got some miles on him, and he's played a lot of hockey and some tough hockey for these guys. And if they have the ability to potentially de-emphasize Giordano in the favor of getting some opportunities for guys like Valimaki, maybe they look at that. So, I think right now, we're setting, if we're writing in the defensive pairings, I think we have, Giordano, Anderson, Hannafin, Tanev, and Valimaki and Nestorov as your 3 pairings with, I don't know, I guess Oliver Shillington as the 7, but they can mix and match those guys in a lot of different ways now, and it's going to be interesting to see what they like. Are they all 6 of them, all 7 of them, all-star caliber players? No, they're all functional NHL players though, and you can probably pick names out of a hat and probably come up with 3 pretty decent pairs.
Well, and I would suggest, like Zach says, I don't think Tanev's a top 4 guy. And I think Tanev's probably a top 4 defenseman. Ryan on the comments wondering, is Nestorov right or left-handed? He's technically a left shot, but is comfortable like TJ Brody, like Eric Gustafson, heck, like we believe Oliver Shillington, comfortable playing his offside on the blue line. That's what Nestorov is. But what I think is interesting about this team and about the blue line right now is there's a lot of people, and I understand it. There's some concern out there right now that they are not as good or not as deep as they were last year. But I don't know, the top 4 is about a saw-off, or maybe you could make the argument might be a little bit better. I think probably closer to a saw-off, but when you promote Anderson to the top 4 permanently, when you've got Giordano, Hannafin, and then you add Tanev as that other right shot defenseman, I think the top 4 is as good as it was last year, even with the subtractions of Brody and Hamonic. So I'm okay with the way the top 4 looks. And yes, is the third pairing as good as it was last year? Maybe not, even with the Nestorov signing. And you don't have that option of bouncing Brody back to the third pair or having a stud like Anderson on the third pair. But how important is the third pair? You know what I'm saying? I'm not trying to say it's not important, but Pike, third pair plays 11, 12, 13 minutes a night, right? And
Yeah.
if the Flames, and this is what I was talking about a little earlier, and we can jump into it in just a second, but if the Flames had to sacrifice the third pair so that they could go out and finalize a deal for Jacob Markstrom, I'm okay with that. You get better in the position that plays 60 minutes a night at the expense of the spots that play 11, 12, 13 a night.
Yeah, and like let's be honest here. Like, okay, we think we kind of know how their top 6 is. Presumably, Shillington resigns at some point for some amount of money. Probably not a ton, but he'll probably be back. So Shillington's a guy that can play either side. Alexander Yellison was in the NHL for a good chunk of last year, and look, he was pretty good. Like he's not going to exactly be jumping into the rush and doing sweet dangles, but he's sort of a meat and potatoes NHL defenseman, and he was perfectly fine. They got Connor Mackey on the left side, who's on his way up. They have some other guys in the system. I know they're really high on Colton Pullman, sorry. And so they have. We don't even know how Carl Johan Lerby's going to look like at the AHL level. So there's a lot of guys in the system, and of the guys that we've seen, like presumably, Yelson's your you're fourth on the right side now, so they're at least
fourth or fifth if you
so
throw Yellison in there too. I don't know. Yellison, Petrovic seem pretty
yeah,
interchangeable to me.
and that's the thing. Like, so were, in terms of guys who have played the NHL level, they're about 9 deep with guys they're probably comfortable with, and then you have Connor Mackey, who they're pretty excited about. So from these guys, like, as much as they're saying, like, are they replete with NHL bodies the way they were during the restart? No, they don't have like 12 guys who have played a bunch of NHL games. But Petrovic is a guy who can step in and be functional. Yellison is a guy who's young and can step in and be functional. Shillington has been at the very least functional and occasionally pretty impressive at the NHL level. And they got Mackey, so they could probably roll out 5 pairings of pretty decent defensemen. And the guys who are on the fringes are guys that are inexpensive. They can basically swap in and swap out. So and I think that's the nice thing what they've been doing. Like, is it perfect? Well, no. Of course it's not perfect. That's why these guys were available for league minimum. But at the same time, they have options, and I think that's one of the things that they didn't feel like they had earlier on.
Zach writes on the comments as we continue on Flames Nation Live, says, I would have signed Hamonic to league minimum instead of Nestorov. I don't believe Hamonic is looking for league minimum. I would suggest that the door is closed and not reopening on Hamonic returning to the Calgary Flames. So I would not be holding your breath on Hamonic coming back to Calgary. I don't think that's going to happen. He is looking at other places, but I don't think he'll be coming back to Calgary. So
if Hamonic was willing to sign for league minimum anywhere, he would have been signed by now.
yes. And I don't think he's looking for league minimum, and I don't think he's coming back to Calgary. I think you can start to write off on that one. Coming up on your screen right now is Pike's article from earlier today. It says the Flames will be different in 2021, but the big question to me is that second part. Will they be better? That's up at flamesnation.ca right now. Now, it was an 8 o'clock post, so happened before Nestorov joined the team, but I don't think Nestorov is the be-all and end-all. But it
we're
really
throwing the
does.
whole thing out. We're throwing the whole thing out. Nestorov.
Did you delete this? Is this no longer good because Nestorov was signed?
Hey, it's not like Mangiapane where 2 hours after I posted it became irrelevant again.
Yeah, exactly. That one you got about 2 hours worth of run on. But it's a really fair question. They are going to be different next year. This is going to look like a significantly different team. But the question is, and this is the question we were talking about on the big show here at Sportsnet 960 all day, Will Klein and myself, we were wondering, okay, they have made changes. They have overhauled their goaltending position. Markstrom in, Domingue out, Talbot gone, Gillies gone, so on and so forth. And the blue line looks very different. Brody out, Gustafsson out, Hamonic out, probably Stone out. Who knows? Forbort's not coming back. And then they bring in Tanev. Valimaki's having a hell of a year in Finland right now. There's an overhaul going on the blue line, in net, and they've said goodbye to some players up front. They've brought a couple players in up front, kind of tweaking around the edges. So my question is, there's been a lot made of this team not being as deep as they were and not being as flush as they were, like you said, the last time we saw them during the restart. But I guess my question is, with Markstrom in the fold right now, when you net everything out, and we don't know what they're going to do between now and the start of next season, but when you net everything out, are the Flames a better, more difficult team to play now than they were at the end of last season? And the more I think about it, like, I get it. They're not as deep on the blue line. They're not as deep at forward, although they're a little deeper now with the signings of Dominic Simone and Joachim Nordstrom, which I like both of them at NHL Min. But when you add Markstrom to the fold, Pike, I think you can make a pretty good argument that they might be a tougher team to play against next year just because they've added that elite defenseman and have only subtracted at fourth line and third pairing areas. That's kind of where I am leaning right now, knowing there's still 2 months or so until training camp.
Yeah, and honestly, I think the moves that they've made, like, I really like some of the fourth line pieces that they had. Like, like they bring Zach Ronaldo back. Zach Ronaldo's a perfectly fine 13th forward, but if you feel like you need to use him all the time, there's probably something wrong with your lineup. Well, they signed Nordstrom and they signed Simone and they signed, they have Goddenwait in the wings and Matthew Phillips and potentially someone like Adam Ruzicka. So they have a lot of options in terms of flexibility in that bottom six that that you don't really have if you have to use a Ronaldo or a Buddy Robinson all the time, or a Mark Jankowski. So you subtract what 1.675 million for a guy who is a very limited player, granted pretty good at the PK, but 5-on-5 a pretty limited player, and they use that money like for $300,000 or $200,000 less than they were playing Jankowski. They got Nordstrom and Simone. Okay, that sounds good to me, because then you can throw some of that money, the Jankowski money, you throw at goaltender. They take some of the Michael Frolik money, and Michael Frolik was a bottom sixer before he got traded. You throw that money and you throw it at Markstrom. You take some of the money that you were, were they going to be paying $5 or $6 million? Like, realistically, are they? As much, I think TJ Brody's a better defenseman than Chris Tanev. Like, I think that's. But is he?
Yeah, I agree
Is
with
he
that.
worth $500,000, a no move clause, and not getting Markstrom? Because that's basically what the arithmetic is. And if you throw an extra, if you take $500,000 from defense and throw it on goaltender, so you have two guys you feel like can go to war with in a what's probably going to be a season. I think they have flexibility, and I think the big question for me is, what's Hockey Ops going to do with it? What's Jeff Ward going to do with it? Because, last year, I think part of it was basically, Jeff Ward wanted to give the guys who got them there a chance to sink or swim, but he didn't really do a lot of mucking around with the lines or the pairings until the very, like, the 9th or 10th game of the playoffs, when basically the water was coming out of the dam and they were starting to sink. So, okay, they got a clean slate here, and they have a lot of different players and a lot of different looks, and it's going to be really interesting to see what they can do, because, okay, like, the top six seems set, but potentially, depending what happens with back-to-backs, with, game situations like that, and especially, we'll probably get into this in the future when the NHL schedule becomes a little bit clearer. If they're doing a bubble of some kind, we're going to have a Canadian division of some kind where the schedule is mostly the same teams in some sort of rotation. That could be kind of interesting for a strategy, because traditionally, in the regular season, you see, outside of occasional home and homes, you don't see the same team a lot in succession. So, this next year on so many levels is going to be utterly fascinating. And I think the Flames have given themselves a lot of lineup flexibility in terms of, maneuvering. I'm sure they would love some more cap flexibility, but with the cap space they have, I think they've done a decent job of giving themselves some breathing room.
A couple of comments to get to. Kyle's wondering about some offer sheets or going after Hayden Fleury in Carolina. Fleury's kind of the forgotten man in Carolina. But I do I still think, as an RFA, I still think Carolina has plans for him. Sure, going after a guy who is an Alberta boy and going after a guy who is still 24 would be great. I just don't think to this other text that says with all the juicy RFAs out there, why no offer sheets, especially to take advantage of Tampa Bay's cap situation? And that comes from Andrew. It's just, offer sheets are the sexiest thing to talk about, but it's like they happen so rarely. Like, we saw Sebastian Aho get offer sheeted. It was like a blink of an eye, and Carolina had already matched. I mean, offer sheets just happen so rarely. Every year, it seems like you could make the case that it would be a really good atmosphere for offer sheets, and yet they never really happen on a regular basis, right? Like, it's just, there's such a rarity that I've kind of stopped waiting for them to happen, because they just don't happen very often.
And honestly, let's be honest, two things. One, the NHL, like, Pat, you and I both know, like, hockey is a very small world, like, extremely small world. Everybody knows each other. It's the running gag is basically the same 10 people kept getting hired in Hockey Ops league wide, because the same 10 people do end up getting hired in Hockey Ops. So some of it, I think, is just logistics of, you don't want to be seen as screwing over one of your buddies, because hockey's a small world and world where it travels. But on the other hand, like nobody has cap space. I mean, like it'd be lovely if the Flames had some cap space, but just looking at Puckpedia, there are I think a bunch of teams with incomplete rosters who are millions of dollars of the salary cap. The Jets have $27,000 left. The Flames have $500,000 or $485,000 left. The Oilers 735. Like no one has cap space. And the teams that do have cap space, okay. And I'll just point this out. I'm in no means trying to crap on these organizations. They're all full of lovely people, but with the way the teams are right now, would you want to sign as an RFA in Ottawa, Detroit, New Jersey, or Buffalo? Maybe Buffalo, maybe. But then you have to live in Buffalo. I'm sorry, Buffalo, I love you. But that's the thing. Like,
but yeah, like you're those aren't the places that you're jumping in and saying, yes, I want to sign here. And a lot of the teams that you'd want to sign the offer sheet with aren't in a spot where they can sign you to an offer sheet. Montreal has no cap left. They've already
yeah,
signed everybody.
that's the thing. Like, say if you're the Flames, you can go to let's say Hayden Fleury example. You can see these guys going to Hayden Fleury and be like, hey, I'll give you a league minimum to sign in Calgary. He can be like, sweet, I'll sign for league minimum. And then Carolina will just match it. I mean, that was the whole thing. Like
exactly.
the thing that was sort of uproarious in the hockey community about the the offer sheet last year with Carolina is they offer sheeted him. I think the day it was middle of the day on July 1, and then like within 20 minutes, official word came out from Carolina being like, cool, thanks, bros. We'll match that sucker. Like they didn't even wait the full period.
That saves us a lot of headache. Now we don't have to negotiate.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Don Waddell just managed to go on an earlier vacation because the thing that was like that, and that was honestly that was in a year where every team seemingly had a pain in the ass RFA negotiation drag on until August or September. In some cases, October. They got theirs done in July, and they could just go on with life. So, yeah, our offer sheets are fantastic, but they never work out the way people think they're going to.
And they just don't happen very often. Here's a comment from Rob, a question from Rob as we can move into our next topic. So he says, I'm not saying you do this, but do these signings at all make you consider moving Derek Ryan and saving that cap space, possibly going with Monahan, Backlund, Bennett, and Nordstrom, Simone, or Godin at center? You're missing a name there, Elias Lindholm. I will continue to pound the drum with everything I have for Elias Lindholm down the middle. But that also leads us to our Twitter question of the day from Noah. It says, do you guys still believe a trade will happen between now until whenever next season gets underway? And this is what fascinates me about where the Flames are right now, because they have tinkered with their forwards. Like we've seen Quine leave and Jankowski leave and Reeder leave. And then we've also seen Nordstrom signed and Simone signed. So we've seen some tinkering in the bottom 6 or bottom 3 of their forward groups, but we haven't seen them make any type of significant change to their forward group, whereas we've seen significant change on the blue line and in net. And one of the things that we all talked about going into this offseason was whether or not the Flames could go into next year with the same forward group as they exited last year unceremoniously with. I still believe what is best for the Flames is to make a significant change up front, whether that means Johnny Gaudreau, whether that means Sean Monahan. I don't know, but I believe a significant change to the group of forwards is what this team needs to help them get to the next level, but we haven't seen it yet. I believe that in this economic climate, it's going to be harder to make that type of deal just because the dance partners are as restricted as you are, and everybody's flat around the league because of a flat cap. But I still think that needs to happen. I still think that those conversations are being had behind the scenes, and I think it's still the best thing for the Flames going into next year to make a hockey trade involving a Monahan or involving a Gaudreau.
Yeah, and I mean, there's not much other things they're going to do because, like, let's be honest. Are you going to move Lindholm? No. Actually, if we're just being pure logistics, if you're Brad Treliving, there's a handful of assets that were here before he got here that are still around. Jankowski's gone. He was a carryover. I think the organization, I think the running gag inside the organization was he was found money because they didn't draft him. They managed to sign him and they got some good years out of him. And now he's in Pittsburgh now. With Johnny Gaudreau and Sean Monahan were guys that were here before. TJ Brody and Mark Giordano were guys that were here before. Brody's on to Toronto. So really, the guys from the pre-Treliving group is basically down to 4 guys. And Backlund's got a no trade. And when they signed him to the deal they signed him at, they were thinking, I think internally, what was relayed to me was they would have had to sign multiple human beings to do the amount of things on ice Backlund could do. So you don't trade your Swiss Army Backlund. You just keep him and use him wherever you need to use him up and down the lineup. You're not going to do anything with Lindholm because they traded for him and he's making a perversely small amount of money based on how
he's got to have a top 10 contract.
Sub 5, and he plays every situation. First unit PK, first unit power play, 20. So you're not going to move him.
Perennial 30 goal scorer.
Yeah, Mangiapane's already underpaid. As soon as he signed that second deal, if he's adequate as a second line player, he's underpaid. So your second and you're who's the other guy in the second line? Oh yeah, the guy's going to be captain whenever Giordano decides to retire or hand it over the sea. So the second line and the right side set in stone. So it's essentially just those 2 guys. So I'm fascinated what they're going to do, and I completely agree with you because I think we talked about flexibility earlier. We haven't seen those 2 guys, Gaudreau or Monahan, have a lot of success away from each other. We haven't seen them play a lot away from each other outside of that first month or so when Jeff Ward came in, and it looked okay, but it sort of made the rest of the lineup kind of weird, and you end up having a Selke nominee in Backlund play on the wing for some reason. Like I get why they did it, but it was weird, and I don't think it's an attempt at flexibility. It got guys out of their comfort zones for a little while, and I'm not sure if it worked the way they wanted to, but it was weird, and I'm glad they stopped doing it. But it's still I think it speaks to a desire for some flexibility in the lineup because let's just be honest, there's some players who don't look good away from each other. There was Dougie Hamilton did not look like a great defenseman when the Flames put him away from Mark Giordano. And granted, a lot of that's Giordano's really good at hockey, but at the same point, there's some guys if Gaudreau and Monahan can only work with each other, that really handcuffs your ability to line match, to shuffle the deck, to get your group going. And I think the worst or one of the things they could do is make a permanent change in terms of you take one of those guys away, you don't have that crutch to lean on anymore, and you have to figure out some more fundamental things. So
I think that the concept of moving Lindholm to the middle, a few things. I think if Monahan is here, still move Lindholm to the middle. Go with the best center ice depth that you can and plug and play your wingers elsewhere. And keep Monahan and Gaudreau together. Put them with Dubé and feed them nothing but offensive starts. Feed them nothing but second and third lines on the other team. Go for it. Let Backlund take on the heavies. And I think Lindholm played 26 games as a full-time center, 20 points in those 26 games. He produced at a decent rate. He took on defensive responsibility at a decent rate. And I think a line of Tkachuk, Lindholm, and Mangiapane is an outstanding way to go head-to-head with every good line in the NHL, whether Monahan's here or not. But as Mike writes on the comments, if anyone goes, it'll be Monahan. Well, knowing that Lindholm is waiting in the wings, I think that there is something to be said about making a hockey trade for Monahan. If you can get, good luck, I'm not saying this is easy, but if you can get a top 6 bona fide right shot winger, move Lindholm to the middle, and then start to see what your line combinations look like for next year. I think that there's absolutely something to be said for that. So I just think that it's tough to sell me on the Flames being a playoff contender if they come back with the same group of forwards that has failed to get the job done in the playoffs and has let the team down. Let's be honest. Monahan, Gaudreau, and to a lesser extent Lindholm and Backlund, have not been able to be the same guys in the playoffs that they were in the regular season. And specifically Monahan and Gaudreau, they've been there for what, 3, 4 different playoff rounds now and haven't been able to get it done. Okay, give them a little bit of a pass for year one, but against Anaheim, against Colorado, against Dallas, that's 3 playoff years that they don't get the job
And
done, right?
let's be honest here, 4 different playoff trips, 4 fairly unceremonious exits outside of that one, the 2015 free pass against
The
Vancouver.
miracle
But
year.
that's 4 different coaches. So at some point, you got to stop changing the oil and start looking at something else.
Yep. Here are, as we start to wrap things up on Flames Nation Live, he's Pike, I'm Steinberg. A few more comments, though. Want to get some of these in. Liam writes, what impact, if any, do you guys think the looming expansion draft has on some of the moves that we're seeing, or lack of moves in some cases? I haven't seen from a Flames perspective, Pike. I don't know if there's been a lot of expansion draft related moves. Like, I think the Chris Russell extension in Edmonton is absolutely expansion draft related, but I don't know if there have been any for the Flames that are significant expansion
I
draft
mean,
moves. There has not been a Tom McCollum signing as of
I
yet for the
mean,
team.
like what like they have Parsons signed, so like Parsons will be an RFA at the end of this year, so they got Parsons and they got Markstrom, so goaltending is set because they're gonna protect Markstrom because they have to, and they're gonna expose Parsons because they can, and boom, they're done. They don't need to do anything else. They don't need to
Yep.
rush anything in terms of making a decision for backup beyond the season. They're set. They don't need to do anything. On the blue line, Chris Tanev, barring something weird happening, will be exposed. He's making $4.5 million. He probably gets through. I can't see. I think Tanev and Shillington will be exposed, and they'll protect the 3 defensemen, Giordano, Anderson, and Hannafin. I mean, I can't see them exposing their captain. I'm sorry, guys. I know he's going to be going on 38 at that point, but it's just logistically, it's a weird look to expose the guy who's been so good for your franchise. It's kind of to be. I don't want to sound mean, but it'd be kind of a slap in the face to him. And
I'd be interested to see, like, I'm really interested to see what happens with Gio this season. If he returns to being a top, like, I thought he was a top pairing defenseman during the regular season. I thought he was the best defenseman on the team during the regular season and probably a top 20 defender in the NHL. In the return to play, he was not. He was not very good in the
he
return to
was
play.
he was okay.
I thought Brody was better. I thought Anderson was better. He's supposed to be their best defenseman. He wasn't in the return to play. If he's that during the regular season, then I wonder about the expansion draft. If he's back to what he was during the regular season, then I'm with you. I think that they keep him and don't protect
Yeah,
him.
and
Rather do
yeah,
protect him,
and
but
up front
don't
they got
expose him.
7 spots. So let's flat out. They have to ask formally Milan Lucic to waive his no move. He probably will. I can't imagine they go through the trade without him, coming up with some sort of a handshake agreement. We don't know anything. There's just suspicions, and they talk to. We confirmed they talked to his agent. They talked to him before they made the trade. So I don't think they would do it. That he said, "Screw you guys, I'm not waiving." That said, he's under
Watch your mouth. Watch your mouth. There's a
but he's
family
under no
show.
obligation to do so. But I'm pretty sure Lucic waives. So assuming Lucic waives, you expose Lucic, and then you got 7 spots. So assuming no trades, you got Backlund, Gaudreau, Monahan, Lindholm, Mangia, basically the entire top 6, and then Dubé. There, your spots are all done. Where does that leave Sam Bennett? Probably exposed. So that's like if Bennett, like right now, if I'm Seattle, I'm just taking Bennett if he's out there because I'm not going to be dumb here. He's young. He'll be cost control for another couple of years. He'll be hungry because he might be in a new situation. He's hungry now and he's in a good situation. So, I think the 2 things I think goal expansion wise to watch for this season are what happens with Giordano's game, because will he turn into more of a depth piece, which is still useful, but do you want to be spending the kind of money on a depth piece? Granted, I don't think they're going to expose him regardless. And the other thing is, okay, Sam Bennett's really good. They really like Sam Bennett in the playoffs. And if he turns into playoff Sam Bennett most of the time to the point where we just refer to him as Sam Bennett when he plays good, what do you like? Do you expose Dubé? Well, he's going to be an RFA. And he's super cheap, and the Athletic
And
posted a
he's
very
younger.
nice thing about him. Corey Proman did a breakdown. Either him or Scott Wheeler. I'm sorry if I'm mixing those two up. I think it was Scott Wheeler actually did a breakdown of the some of the youngest players in the systems, and I think both Scott and Corey were very complimentary towards Dubé because Dubé is awesome. So you're probably not going to expose Dubé. Do you expose Backlund? I mean, he's got a decent freight and a no trade, but you can still expose him, and maybe his cap it scares some people away the way it did with Troy Brower. So they've got a lot of different options, and I think seeing what can they do to keep a Sam Bennett around would be, I think that's something to look at. And potentially, like,
Let's wait to see what Sam Bennett is during the regular season. Let's cool the talk
they're
about
going to upend
exposing Backlund
and
over Bennett
yeah,
before we see
and
what
that's it.
Bennett does in
You
the
know,
regular season. His 10 games were great in the return to play. I'm not
yeah.
exposing Backlund for the chance that Bennett does that again if he's gonna be the inconsistent guy we've
Yeah.
seen from him
And
over the next
and we
60
we saw
regular
Sam
season
Bennett as
games.
a center for 10 whole games, maybe 15 games this entire season, and he was good, but in a small sample size, and he also mucked up his tricep and couldn't take faceoffs for a good chunk of it. So, uh, yeah, I just think it's going to be, that's one of the things to look forward to, because like Sam Bennett, I think they're still waiting for the real Sam Bennett to show up. And how long did it take Backlund to become Backlund? I mean, Michael Backlund didn't really become who he is now in terms of a complete NHL player until after that 2013 lockout when he came back.
But was trending
Yeah,
towards it. Like all the underlyings had him go. I don't know if that's what Bennett
yeah,
is
like
is trending towards. Bennett's underlyings are like, I like Sam. Don't get me wrong, and I still think there's something there. I just, his trajectory, like it seemed like Backlund was on a very um, easy to predict
well,
trajectory rather, easy to project
Backlund
trajectory, which I've
was,
now turned into a
we had
projectory.
this
But I don't know
we
if
had these
Bennett is.
conversations with Kent Wilson, for eons. Just the idea of, man, Michael Backlund, 21, 22 years old, great player. Why they stuck him with some plugs on the fourth line and the third line, and sort of made him be the defensive conscience for those guys. And then he got placed with more and more offensive responsibilities, and because he had those opportunities. Granted, he was good regardless, but the fact is he got to learn the NHL game with those tough minutes, and then they gave him better opportunities and better line mates, and he had some horrendous injury luck early on. I remember, I think, what was it? It was one season they said Backlund will be centering. I think it was Camilleri and Iginla, and at
No,
the last
It was Iginla and
oh yeah,
Tange, I
the
believe.
last game,
Yeah,
the last practice, the day before.
yeah, he broke his
Yeah, he
hand.
broke his hand and was out for 3 weeks or a month, and
Yeah,
then he came back and was. You could tell he came back early. He was trying to get his legs back, and he didn't look great until like January that year. So like he had terrible luck with injuries, and he had some. They basically made him earn everything he got in terms of deployments. They stuck him. I love Joe Colborne, but Joe Coburn was not the best player in that line the year he scored all those goals with Backlund. Same with Lance Boma. But Michael Backlund has made a lot of players a lot of money based on him making his line mates look like $1 million. And then, like, let's be honest, it was basically what 2 years, like 3 years ago, when they put Frolik and Kachuk with him, that he finally had line mates who were as good as him. Like that's
yes. But like, I just don't think that you can say that Bennett is trending in the same way. Is the point
oh
that
yeah.
I'm making? It's like Backlund, absolutely. But
Backlund at the same ages, and we'll probably go into this some point during the offseason because we have no idea when the hell hockey's coming back. So we need to put something on the website and talk about something on Sportsnet 960 The Fan. But I'm pretty sure if you go year by year, Backlund at every age up until the one Sam Bennett is now was probably better than Sam Bennett. And that's not to say Sam Bennett's not good. Sam Bennett's quite good. I just think Backlund at every step was a little bit better in some key ways, which made us more confident that Backlund could become
yeah,
Backlund.
yeah.
But, I think it's just hard to project. I love Sam, but he's hard to project because he's so inconsistent. He's inconsistent for a lot of reasons that he has no control over, but he's still kind of inconsistent.
Just to wrap up, a couple more. Want to make sure that we do acknowledge. Rob Burnett says, "Weird to expose your captain. Ask Todd Simpson about that." So Simpson probably would have been if he was exposed, I don't even remember. That would have been like the Nashville expansion draft, going back to when Nashville or Atlanta would be the expansion draft that he would have still been a member of the Calgary Flames. And then Mike says keep an eye on Mangiapane this year for an epic season. I don't think you're going to get any disagreement from Mr. Pike or myself. That's it. Be well. Stay safe if you're in Calgary. Drive safe if you're in Calgary this weekend, and stay warm. We'll talk to you probably Monday for another edition of Flames Nation Live. Bye, Pike. Have a good
Bye,
weekend.
Patty.
Bye, everybody. Be well. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you soon. It's been another edition of Flames Nation Live. Check us out at flamesnation.ca on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter. Follow Pike and I, and be tuned into the big show on weekdays from 1 till 6 p.m. on Sportsnet 960 The Fan. Be well. Have a great weekend, everybody.